Beyond the Pelvis is hosted by Dr. Keneal Siegel, a pelvic floor PT and intuitive healer, and Laura Haraka, a somatic practitioner and breathwork facilitator. Each week, we explore alternative and holistic approaches to healing chronic pelvic pain and other painful or chronic conditions. Join us and other experts in mind, body, and spiritual healing as we discuss a wealth of modalities ranging from ancient practices to modern therapies that challenge the conventional Western model of treatment. Let's get right to it. Okay, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Pelvis. Today we have a very lovely guest, Emily Rae Davies. She will be here with us to talk about all the work that she does. So just to introduce her a little bit before we jump right in, Emily Rae Davies is an ordained priestess of body and sexual mysteries in the service of a global community of women who are on a journey of physical, sexual, and spiritual activation. She's been a student of spirituality, yoga, sacred sexuality, Eastern philosophy, and natural healing for over 20 years and possibly lifetimes before that. We're quite excited to speak to her about all of the above. And she's been a teacher for about 10 years or so. So, Laura, we would like to welcome Emily.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. I have to say, your bio completely intrigued me. So that's why I wanted to have you on our podcast today. So I was wondering if you can just share a little bit more about yourself and who you are today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for asking. The term priestess is newer for me. In terms of how did I become that, I became ordained through a priestess process, which is through a lineage from a woman named Nicole Christine. And she lived in the 80s. And I am locally here in Cincinnati connected with some women who've been through this priestess process, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And it was so interesting because I sort of started to have really intense downloads around sacred sexuality and the spiritual nature of sexuality well before I found this work. But I started Googling around and I started to find some information about other women who were sort of waking up to these memories around the spiritual nature of sexuality and how sensuality is sort of a superpower of women. And it resonated with me on a level that I started researching. So I have messages from I don't know, 5-10 years ago that I was looking for this community of women that I just went through this process last year and didn't even remember that I had that. It was just like presented to me right in front of me. Hey, do you want to go through this process? So anyway, it's sort of like that speaks to the lifetimes, right? Because it's sort of like as I've been on my spiritual path, I've had nudges and things that felt really alive or really expansive for me, but not always had the context for that. Where does this fit? Does this make sense? Is this even real? And then the resources presented. So it's been really neat. So that's why I say lifetimes before, because it's sort of like a memory. There's something visceral about this. Feels like home. This way of relating to women feels like home to me. So my priestess work is really about becoming a safe person for women to go into very vulnerable spaces. So my original training, more when I was down the path of science and logic and yoga, which yoga it is very scientific, and it has manuals for a lot of what the spiritual teachers are talking about today. These are the yogic texts. So my original path was philosophy and yoga and studying religion, studying theories on ultimacy. Then I started getting into studying natural healing, very attracted to stories of miraculous healing. And then I went down some therapeutic yoga routes. I've done trainings in the heart. And then I thought the heart space was my space, cardiac healing, but there's very much an emotional and spiritual and community component to that on top of the practices and the diet. But the sexual piece, the pelvic piece was always the thing that it was like, could I do that? I don't know if I could do that. I was like, I don't know if I can go there. I mean, I'm raised in a pretty conservative family, and I'm still, I would say, more on the conservative side in terms of like women who do this work on sexual and feminine embodiment, but it is my expression. And I think all of that work prior, like learning about the body and different modalities for working with the nervous system, becoming super safe, helping someone feel super safe, even if it's just for a brief moment of time, and how that imprints the mind. So anyway, all of that to say that my journey, it was almost like as I started to do this work with women, and I'm still, I feel emerging, as this, like the person who's doing sexual embodiment work, because it is very deep. It is very, very deep work. It can be very heavy work. But all of my path, it's like when you look back and you're like, does any of that make sense? And then you're like, actually, all of that makes sense for where I am today. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, you brought up a lot that was so interesting. I was smiling and laughing the whole time because I feel like yoga is a good introduction to lead people to where they really want to go. And I hear that a lot where people start yoga. And at least for me, when I started yoga, it was for stress release because I was a teacher, or I was student teaching, I think, still at the time. And it was really stressful to be doing that and in school full time. And I just needed an outlet. And I heard, oh, yoga is really good for stress management, or exercise is really good for stress management. And then I did it, and it just sort of turned into this thing, which is me today, where it's more than just yoga. So it's interesting how it evolves, and you had also brought up like downloads. Can you explain that? I'm curious to how you explain that for people, because there are people, because I'm in this space, I'm well aware of what that is, but there are people who are like, what are downloads? You mean like you downloaded a file onto your computer? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, sort of like that. Thank you so much for asking. And actually, I think the connection to yoga is really relevant to like receiving downloads. You know, it's funny. I don't know if I would have answered it the same way a couple of years ago, because I have a very strong rational mind. It's not always friendly to some of the feminine side, the more intuitive side of me, and aspects of myself that feel more natural but don't feel acceptable in
yeah,
this world. So but yoga takes me into a deeper sense of self. We can call it the witness, we can call it our soul, they call it atman. Atman is the Sanskrit term. And from that place, it's sort of like looking through a lens without all of these filters of what should be, what could be, what is, according to societal standards and what we're told, how to think, any of that. So from that place, we probably feel in our bodies expanded. We probably feel this inner tickle in our heart. We might even feel the feeling of ecstasy in our belly. We like, that's the state that I could be in when I receive a download. So, and then what happens is my brain will start to think of thought. It's like imagination, essentially. It's like, that's more of like, I guess, the visual side. There can be like perception that isn't associated with visions, like a picture, but perception from an auditory space, a knowing, like any of the higher senses. So what a download is, as far as the way that I can explain it, is I'm already in this state of connection with myself. Like, I've done my practice. My brain feels clear. I don't have monkey mind. I'm not in a state of hyper survival, sympathetic state. I'm not there. I'm receptive. I'm more open. I'm relaxed. I'm deep within myself. And then information, visual images, guidance, a whisper starts coming to me. And then it feels true. And it's so exciting that you're just like, I got to get a pen and write all of this information down. So, and then what do you do with that? Then you come out of, maybe the next day you're like, oh, well, I don't know about that, whatever. That's so woo-woo. Like, that's not real. So I honor the logical mind too. And I honor everybody's path. They don't, I think channeling is, if it's okay, I could just talk about channeling for a second. Cause sometimes so people channel, right? And we can sort of like get the self out of the way, and we have messages coming through. And I know a lot of people who do this. I'm not like super excited about giving up myself to other voices. like in that way. I'm not like, come through me, like, I don't know, Edgar Casey and like share, like, so there's a difference there. It's more resonant with, this isn't someone else. This is like a message that it feels more universal, I would say, but it resonates with my soul. Like, meaning like my truth, like I still feel expanded. I still feel calm in my body. I might feel excited too, but that's the marker point for me, is like, there's some juice there. There's something to investigate more.
Thank you for sharing that. I like your definition. Yeah, it's been described as downloading or channeling. That's another way that people describe it. But for me, it's what flow is, right? When you are in flow and you're open to receiving, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, I just got the answer to the very thing that I didn't even know how to address before. To me, that is channeling or receiving downloads or intuition or a gut feeling, or what some people refer to as the clairs, like, oh, I heard a message, I saw something, I felt something, or I just know this, right? And that to me is what receiving a download is. It's sort of putting yourself in this state where you're more open to receiving. And as woo as it sounds, because I know someone's gonna be like, this is woo as all heck. It is woo, but it is scientific, and being in flow is a brain state. It's been proven. So throw your ego out the window just for a sec. Just be open, right? Be open to hearing and receiving this, because I'm sure this conversation is gonna be a message for someone. It's gonna resonate with someone. They're gonna hear something and they're gonna feel it in a place that they were like, where am I feeling this? I don't even know where. They can't describe it, but they just know that that was meant for me to hear, or for me to know, or for me to investigate. And it's gonna lead them down some path. And going back to yoga leads many people down those paths. That's how it started for me too.
Yeah, it's organizing. It sort of organizes our energy and our brain and our body, and then we don't have so much chaos to sort of deal with and respond to. But if I can just layer in one more piece of that, I love the science on flow state. I haven't read a ton of it, but I am aware of the gentleman with the really intricate name. Maybe you can remember how to pronounce his name, but his book on flow state. But yoga talks about manomaya kosha, and that is the mental body, the mental layer. And through that, we have access to everything that's ever been learned by anyone across time and space. And then also David Hawkins in his book Power versus Force talks about that. I don't know if any of you have read that, but that was one of my earlier, he was like, he sought out to scientifically prove what is enlightenment. And then he ended up giving numbers to different feeling states, and created the levels of consciousness chart. And it's really great information. But he calls the manomaya, what yoga calls the manomaya kosha, he calls the database of consciousness. And it's like this idea behind like critical mass, right? It's like the geese, they just know how to fly. It's like when something is discovered over in the US, and at the same time it's discovered in Asia, it's things like that are, it's like there's the invisible forces that sort of affect and can give us information. It's like we're catching into that flow.
I started yoga a year and a half ago only. And I will say that since I started yoga, I am more connected to my body than I ever was before. And I'm not really sure how it happened, but I'm also a somatic experiencing practitioner. And I don't know if I get a secret whisper or anything like that, but it's kind of the same thing where I just feel a connection in my body when I'm with someone. So sometimes when I'm with a client, even I'll write down a note like left hip, and I'll say, how is your left hip doing? And they'll feel that response in their body with the resonance that I feel from them. And then I'll hold up my piece of paper I did feel that, to let them know. So there's such a resonance that happens that we get. So maybe for me, it's not a whisper, but I get the same thing just feeling it in my body from someone.
There's different clairs, right? And one of them is feeling, one of them is knowing, one is hearing, visual. Did I get all of them?
There's also taste.
Taste. Right.
Yeah,
There's a bunch of different ones.
taste and
Basically, it's a
smell.
sixth sense, right? It's a sixth sense, and we all have the ability to do that. And we all probably do it on a daily basis. We just don't even notice or recognize that it's happening, but it does. And just like any muscle, you can train it to be stronger. So you're more open to receiving these things all the time. And then to me, channeling is just being able to process that information and then put it out there to the world or to someone else, or it's just getting it out of you and into the space around you. But
So I'm just
Mhm.
curious now, how do you work with clients?
So, the way that I work with clients would be I help them similar to what you do, actually. I'm not trained in that modality that you're calling somatic experience. I've studied somatics, it was a part of my yoga curriculum, and then started awakening to my sixth sense, which is also sentience through the body. So, when I work with clients in yoga, I can often essentially it's like I can feel in my body what they're feeling. And this could be, I mean, this could just be like a 65-year-old man who just hasn't moved in 40 years, hasn't really done any exercise. Like it's not specific to I work with people, I've worked with people of all different flavors, just specifically yoga to also more of the sexual embodiment work. Sexual embodiment work is a bit different than sort of like yoga teaching. It is and it doesn't always have to be. If somebody feels like they right now I'm not actually like promoting like I'm looking for clients. I sell my online courses right now and I'm working on building my community. I have two adolescents, so a lot of my energy is like at home parenting them. But when I do work with clients in the sexual embodiment space, it's really to help them and be a mirror for what they're experiencing in their body. And I can help them evaluate their posture and their breath and their tension and the energy behind like their experience and really try to call into presence like bring what is unseen into the scene. So that's definitely like a gift that I'm learning through my work with the priestess community is really how to not get in the way of that and not become overly logical, but really just sort of like allow the like presence through the body. And how does that happen? It really happens through yogic methods, breathing, guiding them into their body. I think that each of us has a certain field. People come to us because they're attracted to us, and they're attracted to us probably because we can help them in some way, whether it's help them in a good way or help them trigger them. So my field, I'm aware that, people, they have a certain like nervous system response in my field. And I try to like help them see themselves differently in that way, like in that field or in that space, in that relaxed space, if that makes sense.
I think it's so interesting that all three of us are the feelers, the clairsentience. Like we feel what other people feel, and we can, tapping into that, we can sort of bring that to the client or the patient's awareness and then help them to process and move through that using the tools that we each have. Like we each we're doing the same thing. We're just using our own tools and our own frequency. You brought that up, you mentioned that you have your field, they're attracted to your field. I see that as frequency or vibration or energy. We all have our unique vibrations and people are attracted to that for good or for bad. Ultimately, it's all for good, right? Even if we trigger them, they're meant to be triggered so that they can go off and find where they belong or whatever it is that they need. But we're all doing that in our own unique frequency. Very interesting.
It is. Yeah, I'm glad we connected. Like I said, I was listening to your podcast this morning and the last couple of days, and I've just been blown away by you too. I'm really grateful for what you do.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Who is drawn to you? Are you drawn, or clients come to you? They find you. Are they more women, men?
It's interesting. I've been pretty hesitant to work with men. I think I've just needing to have more skills to sift through some of the things that can come up in the space of sexual embodiment. I'm working with women right now, and I mean, I'm running ads. So if you're drawn to the ad talks about, issues with the pelvic floor, and also feminine embodiment. And people are attracted to me. A lot of times they say because of my spiritual vibe, they get, and it's been really interesting. We have an advertising agency, and they're very like, all right, we need the concrete benefits. And there are obviously very incredible concrete benefits to learning to stretch, strengthen, and optimize your relationship to your pelvic floor, but there's also so much in between the lines there. There's so much in the space between the lines. So point is, I think people are attracted to me. Women are attracted to me when they want these skills and they are open to more within themselves, more of that connection to their own essence. They want to have a better relationship with their body. They want to feel better in their own skin, but they're good with starting on the physical side. Those are the people that are attracted to my online course right now. It's like, let's start with the physical skills. We can get to the rest as it comes up, if it comes up. I love that about this work. In terms of men, I definitely have men interested in working with me around sexual embodiment for themselves. Like, how can they feel more maybe in control of their sexual urges, how it affects the brain, like they're distracted a lot, or if there's wounds around, whether it's trauma to the physical space around the pelvis, around the penis, or, something painful happened to them that makes them afraid of their sexuality or their sexual energy. So these are the people that are attracted to me that I will say, like, I've been very much in my own practice of how do I serve better, asking God, how do I serve better? Because, admittedly, that going into those spaces with people, and especially men, I think just because of the polarity, I'm not exactly sure, but it takes an incredible amount of inner work. It takes an incredible amount of an anchor, a spiritual anchor within myself, practices to keep myself clear, and community. Got to be able to talk to other people and get support, as you're working with people. So I am aware of what could be possible in terms of the sexual embodiment spaces. And I think my spiritual practice are preparing me for that. But I'm like literally just choosing to be mom right now and like keep all of my energy here with my adolescents, because they've really needed me, to be present. So
Can you explain what it means to be embodied sexually? And is that different for a female or feminine and different for masculine or males?
yeah, thank you for asking that. That's a great question. So it's different in terms of, it's different for everybody. Here's what I've come to know about the essence of sexuality, right? There's some biological factors that determine our genitalia. And then there are other biological factors that affect our brain and how we relate sexually, which, is so wonderful to know. Everybody needs to know that. Like, our sexual development is twofold. It's genitalia and it's also brain. And it just leaves room for so much more than man, woman, and that's that. Like, I think actually it was the book Why Good Sex Matters. I don't know if you've read that book, but it's a really great resource. I think everyone should read. What does that look like when you're embodied? That's everybody's there are millions of flavors. There's an infinite amount of flavors of that. But what does it mean at its core? What is sort of like the basic of sexual embodiment. I would say this. I would say that we are aware of our inner beast, our inner sexual beast. I know I probably shouldn't call it that. I was like, Emily, you need to stop calling it that. But for a lot of us, especially people who are very sexual, but we are also like conservative in terms of like, I'm not going to act on every impulse I have. That's my path. That's my choice and that's my path. And I feel like that's the right path for me. But I'm going to study my beast. I'm going to study the one who wants to merge. I'm going to study the part of me that feels intensely turned on from whatever stimulus is there. So I would say that we have people who are sexual embodied, they know themselves on many levels. They know like what turns them on. They're open to exploring that. They're not closed in a box around who they are, what they are. They know they're open to evolving, and they can feel how their sexual energy affects their brain. I would say that too. And I would say that they have like a good relationship to their body in terms of they're sort of owning it. They're owning them. There's a strong sense of self that comes with sexual embodiment. I would say it's like the sense of self that we have has gone all the way down to the deepest part of our being. And we feel anchored in who we are. And we know that this sexual force wants to move us, but it's not in control until we go into spaces where we can absolutely open that, So I think there's a lot there, but it's a mind, body, and heart experience, I would say.
I actually like the term that you used, beast, and getting to know that inner beast and befriending it. I like the term. I think it's a good one. Now, I'm just curious too. I understand what you're saying about sexual embodiment and things like that. Do you work with women that are experiencing different pelvic pain symptoms?
Yeah, I have. I actually have a program called Yoga for Sexual Pain that I've done in the past.
Why do you feel it's important to tap into your feminine energy?
It's balancing. We live in like a world of duality, they say, but we experience that, right? We experience self and other. We experience night and day. We experience all of the polarities. And so anyone who hasn't tapped into their feminine energy or essentially is comfortable with relax, is comfortable with the mystery, is comfortable with not knowing, is comfortable with playing. Obviously, those are incredibly important parts of like living a good life and being healthy. So for me, I think that it's for everyone. I mean, it is for everyone. We balance the masculine and the feminine, and we come to a still point.
I think it's important to note that we all have both a feminine and masculine energies within all of us. And because we live in this world where it's this or that, generally a more masculine driven world, we often neglect the feminine side of that. Even in these feminine bodies, we are deprived of fully experiencing our femininity. And then even more so for anyone in these masculine bodies, they're deprived of experiencing and expressing their femininity as well. So I think it's great that you're doing this work.
Thank you. And I would say that the equivalent of my work for men would probably be more of like masculine embodiment, because what I think the real like core of that sexual energy is related to, do I feel more masculine and that is my essential nature and that is like the driving force from within me, or do I feel more feminine and that is my essential nature and that's the driving force within me? So so I would say that my work with men would not be they might need to tap into their feminine, but it would probably be more of like their masculine embodiment.
And I think that goes back to what you said earlier with sexuality is the genitalia that we have and also the brain. And to me, that's the hormones, like what hormones are producing and the reactions that are going on in the body. And that puts us, because it's so unique for each of us, that puts us on a spectrum. So you may be more one way on the spectrum, or you may be more another way on the spectrum, or you may be in the middle, or maybe you go back and forth because you, you have equal or whatever it is, but that puts us on the spectrum. And I think, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, the work that you're doing is really sensing into where people lie on that spectrum and then giving them the space and opportunity to embody that more, to really express that and feel comfortable in being that.
Yeah, that's for sure part of it. It just depends on where they are. I think some people they have feel an inner knock at the door. Usually they look around at their life. A lot of times this happens to women who are like in their 40s or 50s who haven't had enough time for themselves, and then they're like, what is this life I've created? And their soul is knocking at the door. Yeah, it's to open that space and say, is it safe enough to listen? Like if you have somebody there helping you, holding you, letting you know, like, no matter what, like you can get through this, like just open the door, like just listen, just hear a little bit of this inner call. What is this inner call telling you?
I think, the biggest challenge I'm seeing women have is connecting to that inner beast, to their feminine energy. I really find that with the clients I work with, you also said, listen. We aren't always listening to our bodies, and connecting to that voice and connecting to that feeling in your body, I find to be the most important, but also the biggest challenge that women face.
I agree. I think that it's also trusting it. I think that we're taught that that isn't real enough to be real, to take up space in our lives. It's not valid, it's not valuable enough. So that's where, on a level of like on a cultural level, on a level of our collective consciousness, making more space for the intuitive and the mystery to be revealed in the moment. That's what, in my biography, I use the term body and sexual mysteries because of my gifts of sentience, because I don't have the answers. The mystery means that there's space for the unknown to be revealed in the moment of our connection, or of your connection to yourself. So I simply get, like, my presence, because I say that, I give you permission to listen to yourself fully and even to trust yourself fully.
Speaking of challenges, I wonder if, going back to what Laura had said with asking about working with individuals with pelvic pain, do you notice a difference between the individuals who have a pelvic pain issue versus those who don't, and maybe they're just not feeling a connection to their pelvic floor and want to? As far as maybe it's harder for them to connect, or there's more blockages, like,
Maybe like for me as like a coach or a teacher, it's harder because I guess I would tend to perceive a lot of sympathetic energy, because it's not just the pain itself, but it's the anxiety around the pain, and it's everything in their lives that's being affected because of this pain. Like, it makes me want to cry just thinking of it, because there's just a high allostatic load. There's just so much to work through. Whereas somebody who doesn't feel connected to themselves, has maybe like a low tone, and they sort of need to like get their power back and bring some of that fire back. It's certainly like a very much of a different pathway. And I will say that as a facilitator and a coach, I think the skill of being able to like hold steady amidst all of that static that's going on in somebody who's experiencing pain every day of their life, that's a lot to unpack. So yeah, I would say that, there is a difference there, but at the same time, the methods can be very similar, right? It can be, how are we breathing? How are we breathing? How can the breath take us deeper into ourselves? And when and that takes time. And then we've met the mystery once we're there, once we're like there. So
I appreciate the fact that you use the breath. It is probably one of my favorite things to use when I'm working with people. It is definitely the first thing that I'm introducing when I am working with someone, just how something so basic, you do it every single day. can be so healing and so beneficial and so effective. And there's so many different ways in which we can change the breath to do so many different things. I mean, the fact that you can legit get high on your own supply of air is just crazy to me. And it can also be used to bring you more inwards, to really feeling what's going on, to control the things in your body that are automatic. It just blows my mind. Just you're like, wow, it's so simple. It's just your breath, but it does so much. But other than the breath, what else, what other methods are you utilizing to help your clients?
It depends on their need, but a lot of times I think, I'm using a lot of yoga props. So I'll get people into a form, a shape, a yoga posture, usually using quite a few props because I find that one of the main things that people struggle with is giving themselves permission to fully feel supported. That's sort of where like the parallel between being on the yoga mat and being in life comes up, and that's why I love yoga methods so much for that reason. So we usually get people into that place where I'll invite a posture. Typically, it would be something laying down on your back, probably even just like a shavasana, laying on your back. Shavasana is the relaxation that we do at the end of a yoga class, but we'll make it more of like a throne. We'll put blankets underneath and the knees and maybe a little something under the shoulder or the head, maybe even some sandbags on the body. So they feel supported. Now, I will say that you can't go right into that with people because they're not going to relax, they're not going to be receptive, they're not going to trust you, they don't know the environment. So, there's a process of taking people into that state. But once we've unpacked sort of that initial discomfort and awkwardness, then taking them into a physical space and breathing. And then it sort of depends on what their goal is. If somebody's just hearing a knock at the door and they're like, I don't know what's going on, I feel like my feminine energy is just knocking at the door, I would probably get them into a state of receptivity and breathe. And then we would just be back and forth, like checking in. And I would try to help them see what's unseen to them in that moment. And then there's other things where if somebody's coming in with pelvic pain or, pelvic floor tension, hypertonic pelvic floor, I'm going to teach them specific stretches for their hips, legs, and all of the things, as well as the breathing exercises.
It's so important to have the support. As women, sometimes we don't always ask for support or think we can't receive support, or it makes us weaker, but support is so important. And I see a lot of people with pain conditions, pelvic pain conditions in particular, and they use this pain as a protector because this pain has protected them or is protecting them from getting hurt in the future. Their feminine energy doesn't feel safe to tap into. So I was wondering if you see a lot of people with that type of feeling or emotion that's coming up for them.
The emotion that their feminine energy is not safe to tap
Yeah,
into.
yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting. You asked what kind of people are attracted to me. And I think on some level, they want to feel safe again there. This is a whole rabbit hole we could start to go down. And I'm open to that. But yes, 100%.
I feel like because I'll get some of these patients too. I get them as patients working as a pelvic floor PT where they know that, okay, there's this disconnect between my brain or me and my pelvic floor. I don't know how to really control it. It's hypertensive or it's very low tone and I don't know what to do about it. So they're coming in, as you even mentioned before, they're coming in with the physical, this is what's physically going on with me, but their soul knows you need a little bit more because if it were just physical, they would go to somebody else or they would just do some exercises and it would be okay. But on a deeper level, they know that they need something more. They don't even recognize what that something more is because it's not them recognizing it, it's something deeper recognizing it and sort of yelling that message up to them saying, hey, can you go in this direction, please? So they don't even know why they're led in that direction. They have no idea why they're even attracted to people like us, but they know, okay, this is the direction that I need to go in. And then when we explain something to them or put them in a position or give them a breath, it's like their soul is like, finally, we're here, we're doing the thing. And it's just about unpacking all the things that continue to come up. I don't know if that resonates. I'm sure it resonates with you because we're all on the same frequency.
It resonates so much. And my heart is just exploding because I'm so happy to have you doing the work that you're doing. Honestly, the world needs you so much. I refer everyone to a pelvic floor physical therapist. And a lot of times they have a great experience. Sometimes they have a terrible experience. And I think the biggest difference is that it's that who can actually see me, the woman, the woman who's hurt because of this, that, or the other emotionally. My identity is hurt, like that is a lot to hold. We have some great training and skills and things that, we need the medical model. We need it, but it can't hold that. It doesn't have the capacity, the skills, but people do. People do, and you do. And I truly, I bow to you, sister. Thank you for doing what you do. Really, to be able to walk both the scientific path and hold that space for the person, that's a healer.
That's funny. I did have a patient one time and she was like, I don't know how to explain who you are and what you do to my friends. And she's like, the only thing I can think of is, well, she's not just a PT, she's a healer. And I thought, that's really funny because I just redid my website and I put it as I'm the intuitive healer because I just came out like, this is just who I am. This is just what I do because I can't not do that anymore. That's just who I am. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all doing it in our own unique way. And I appreciate the fact that we can all recognize that there's people who are attracted to us for reasons they don't even know. They're not even aware of it. And it's beautiful that we can all feel and embody what they're feeling and teach them to embody it for themselves because that's where the healing actually occurs. I'm not doing anything. I'm just sort of there to help you and guide you and support you through this journey. And you mentioned, having them awaken to that is part of the mystery. We're sort of trying to figure out this mystery. It's nothing that you're going to solve for them. They have to solve it. We're kind of just there as guides to help and support them.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I'll have patients say, thank you. You helped me so much. And I say, no, you did it. I just walked you through your body. And some people at first will say it's woo woo to me. And then when they see their pain going down, sometimes they'll even say, "Oh, this must just be a coincidence." But when they can really start tapping into their own body and using their own power, empowering themselves, they're going to find healing.
I think just to wrap up, I would like to ask you, this work is intense. I consider it very dense, right? There's a lot of energy that travels through us in order to be able to hold this space for individuals. And you have to be very grounded in your own spiritual practice or just your own practice of life in general to be able to hold this space without energies getting stuck and caught up in your body. So how do you manage that?
I think community has been the most important part in the more recent, I would say, in the last year, and especially a safe community of women who aren't going to be like my mom and try to like caretake me. but that reflect me, like my own power. I would say that is the number one. And specifically, like I said, I did this priestess process, which was a 9-month, and then I did a high priestess process. But we have circles here that are women's circles that we follow the methodology of an organization called Woman Within. And I'm plugging them because they are amazing. It's free. There's no cost involved. It's a community service. You can go on their website and look for circles locally in your region, and their methods and their ways of holding space for women they've taken me to my next level. But at home, dancing is like number one. I'm not a good dancer at all. Like, I'm bad at it, but I just move. Like, I just turn it on and move. If I get behind on that, forget it. Obviously working out, just doing a little strength training, a little yoga, some meditation and journaling, and burning sage or burning herbs and things, and just, whatever I'm feeling in the moment. I also have basically an entire care team, like massage therapy, facials, chiropractic, acupuncture. I mean, I don't go to these every single month, but I am humbly here on my knees saying I can't tend to this body all by myself. So, and like therapist, I have in the past, obviously quite a bit. So those are my self-care things. I could not do it. Absolutely. There's no way I could do this work without all of those resources.
I think it's so important that you mention that. And I tell my clients as well, I go to therapy, I go to acupuncture, I'll sometimes see a craniosacral therapist, because everybody needs support and self-care in their life. It's impossible to go through this life without community and without help. We're all here to love and help each other. So I think that was a really great point, that even the people that are helping other people heal are using all the modalities out there to help themselves stay centered and stay true to themselves. So that was a really important thing that you said.
Yeah.
So where can people find you if they're looking for your services?
I'm working on an official website. I shared my website. It's more of a landing page, but social media would be a great place. So Instagram or Facebook, and I'm at Emily Rae Davies. That would be the place I would direct you now if you wanted to work with me.
Thank you so much for being here with us. We really appreciate it. And your work is so important and people so need it.
Thank you for having me. And I reflect that right back to the both of you. I'm so grateful that we were connected, and it's been a wonderful conversation.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much.
If you'd like to leave us a message or ask a question, please check the show notes with the link so you can reach us directly, or email us at beyondthepelvis@gmail.com.